Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back. So, Crimson Desert just pushed out its latest patch, and this one is very much in that category of not a giant content drop, but still the kind of update that makes the game feel way better to actually play. It went live on July 24th, and the official word from Pearl Abyss is that this patch is mostly about bug fixes and stability improvements. What I like about this update is that it touches a bunch of different parts of the game instead of focusing on just one thing. You have combat fixes, control fixes, visual fixes, quest fixes, and a few quality of life changes mixed in there too. That usually tells me the team spent some time cleaning up the rough edges people were actually running into while playing, which is always a good sign. This is not the kind of update that changes the whole game overnight, but it absolutely should make day-to-day play feel smoother and less annoying. Let me start with the content side, because there are a few fixes here that sound small until you imagine how irritating they must have been. One of the big ones is that certain bosses were appearing transparent during battle, which sounds like the kind of glitch that can completely ruin the feel of a fight. That is fixed now. They also fixed crops getting stuck and stopping growth in some situations, plus another issue where crops could not be harvested when they should have been ready. So, if anyone out there has been spending time on the farming side of things, that part should be much more reliable now. There's also a fix for Onka and Damian, where the lock status of equipped gear would not save properly. That is one of those bugs that can quietly mess with your setup without you noticing right away, and then suddenly you realize your gear state is not actually staying the way you left it. They also fixed a quest-specific issue in Scattered Honey Jars where the player could not attack while riding the quest objective bear to the village. That sounds very specific, and it is, but that is also exactly the kind of thing that can turn a quest from fun into annoying if it breaks at the wrong moment. Another nice little change is that the Mace of Ambition has been moved to a location where it can be obtained more easily. That means less wandering around wondering whether you missed something or whether the game just buried the item in an awkward spot. There is also a fix for a large fish on the player's back disappearing when collecting fish from a fish trap, which is a weirdly specific bug, but I kind of love when patch notes include stuff like this because it shows how many little systems are interacting behind the scenes. Those tiny interactions are often where the most frustrating bugs live. On the control side, they cleaned up a couple of things that probably got in the way more than people expected. Axiom Force was showing its crosshair even when the target was outside the activation range, which could make aiming feel misleading at a glance. That is fixed now. They also addressed a camera issue where in certain locations the camera would stay zoomed in while swimming. That kind of thing can be low-key annoying because it does not always break the game, but it absolutely breaks the rhythm of moving around. You are trying to get from point A to point B, and suddenly the camera decides to behave like it has its own ideas. Combat and movement got some attention too, and this is the part that will probably matter most to a lot of players. The Wyvern can now be summoned while in midair, which sounds like a big improvement for anyone who wants their movement and combat to feel a little more fluid. They also fixed aerial roll traveling an unusually short distance when used after aerial maneuver. So if you have ever had that moment where your character should have covered way more ground than they actually did, that should be less of a problem now. These are the sorts of fixes that do not sound dramatic on their own, but together they help the game feel way more responsive. The graphics and settings side got a pretty important fix too. HDR was causing the colors and transparency of certain UI elements to look abnormal, which is the sort of thing that can make a polished game suddenly look off in a really distracting way. UI problems are easy to underestimate until they are on your screen every minute you play. If text, panels, or menu elements look strange, it affects everything. So getting that cleaned up matters more than people might think at first. They also fixed various localization errors and improved localization quality across all languages, which is one of those broad fixes that should help the whole player base, even if it does not jump out immediately during a first look. There is a small bundle of other fixes that round things out nicely. The game could occasionally crash when loading cross-save data, and that has been addressed. That alone is a big one because crashes tied to save loading are the kind of thing nobody wants to deal with. They also fixed the character posture looking unnatural while riding a mount, wagons occasionally disappearing when using the escape function with stolen wagons, and Cliff partially sinking into the ground when using blinding flash finisher on a slope. None of those are the kind of thing that sounds massive when you say it fast, but in actual gameplay, they are exactly the sorts of bugs that pull you right out of the moment. Now, even with all of those fixes in place, the team is still being upfront about a handful of known issues that are not solved yet. On PlayStation, using the cross-save feature may still cause an error because of network instability. Fish caught in certain areas are unable to move. Greymane faction quests cannot be progressed while playing as Damian or Unka. If evasion control is set to hold, the default evasion key still works even after the key has been changed. And if Damian dies right after using shield toss, she can no longer use her shield or related skills until you save and reload. That is a pretty specific one, but at least they included the workaround right there. There are also a few platform-specific issues still hanging around. NPCs required for quest progression cannot ride together on legendary animal mounts. On Mac, if you are using a keyboard and mouse at certain resolutions, the cursor position can differ from the actual furniture placement point, and the colorblind filter is not being applied to the UI when colorblind mode is enabled. On PlayStation, the screen may freeze if characters are entered too rapidly while setting a pet or horse name with the virtual keyboard. So the current advice is to type slowly with brief pauses. Then there are the PC graphics issues, where NVIDIA GTX 1060 GPUs can show a white screen if FSR upscaling and frame generation are both enabled, and FSR 4 upscaling can cause rain to disappear or make rainy scenes look blurry or distorted. So there is still a bit of cleanup left to do, but at least the update makes clear what is fixed and what is still being worked on. Overall, this update feels like one of those really practical maintenance patches that quietly makes the whole game better. It is not trying to steal the spotlight with some huge new feature or a giant balance shakeup. Instead, it is smoothing out combat, fixing quest interruptions, cleaning up visual weirdness, improving save reliability, and removing a bunch of little frustrations that can pile up over time. And that matters. Games live or die on how good they feel to actually play minute to minute, and patches like this are what keep that experience from getting messy. So yeah, not the most explosive update in the world, but definitely the kind that players will notice once they jump back in and start moving around, fighting, farming, riding, and doing all the usual stuff without so many random hiccups getting in the way.